Welcome to The Explainer. All right, today we're going to unpack a really powerful framework for coming up with breakthrough ideas. And we're going to do it by looking at one incredible real-world story. Let's dive in.
So our story kicks off with a Nigerian entrepreneur, engineer Charles Aladutu. He calls himself a wordpreneur. What does that mean? It means he runs his entire business based on principles he believes come straight from God.
So here's his journey, and it is a wild one. It goes from a desperate sales trip to a complete dead end, then a mysterious dream, and finally, a government contract that changed absolutely everything. It all started when he went on a mission to sell these palm oil processing machines. He spent 2 months on the road, visiting 30 different farms, totally convinced he had the perfect pitch.
And the result? A big, fat zero. Not a single sale. Despite all the initial excitement, nobody placed an order. He had to go back to Lagos completely defeated, a total failure. So he's back home and he's praying for a solution to this crisis, right? And this is where things get really interesting. He has this incredibly vivid dream. And in this dream, he sees everything with crystal clear detail. A very specific office building in the city, a specific set of stairs he had to climb, and one particular door he needed to approach. Now, he was convinced this wasn't just some random dream. He believed it was a direct instruction, what this whole framework calls a revelation. So what does he do? He actually gets up, goes out, and finds the exact building from his dream and walks right inside. And get this, in what you might call a huge stroke of luck, or, divine intervention, the one person who was supposed to stop him, the receptionist, wasn't at her desk. It was empty. So he just walks straight past the empty desk, right into a director's office, hands him the brochures, and the guy's jaw just about hits the floor. Turns out the government had just been talking about needing this exact solution. I mean, can you believe the timing? They place a massive order right then and there. And that one moment, that one dream, launched a business that has now been successful for over 45 years. Just incredible. Okay, so what does happen here? Was that just a 1 in a million lucky break? Well, according to this framework, it's not about luck at all. This story is a perfect example of a core concept, the power of revelation. Revelation, in this context, is basically information that comes from a divine source. It's like getting a peek behind the curtain at a reality you can't see or hear or touch. The idea is that the solution already exists, you just can't perceive it with your normal senses. And this whole thing is built on a pretty radical idea, right? That this higher level thinking isn't just a smarter version of our own thinking. No, it operates on a completely different plane. It's not about thinking harder. It's about plugging into a different way of thinking entirely. Okay, so if this is possible, how do you actually access these kinds of game-changing ideas? Well, the framework says it all starts with a huge shift in your mindset, a total change in what you choose to value. What we're talking about here is learning to value this intangible information, this word, more than the stuff you can see and touch, more than your own personal history, more than what your culture tells you is possible. It's about being willing to trust an idea that totally contradicts your past experiences. I mean, to put it in perspective, the pastor references the story of Job, who apparently valued God's words more than his necessary food. And food is our most basic human need, right? That's the level of priority we're talking about here. All right, so how do we do this? How do you practically build the capacity to receive these kinds of ideas? The framework actually lays out a surprisingly straightforward 2-step process. Okay, step 1 is you've got to be able to hear it. Within the specific faith tradition, that means making sure your spiritual receiver is switched on, that the line of communication is actually open. But honestly, it's the second step that I think is so fascinating, and it applies to anyone trying to innovate, no matter what you believe. And it's explained with this fantastic analogy. And this leads us straight to the biggest roadblock. The number one thing that stops us from getting these world-changing ideas, our own self-imposed limits. And to explain this, there's this great little story about a fisherman. So picture this fisherman. He's out on the river and he's catching all sorts of fish. But every time he catches a really big one, he throws it back. Someone finally asks him, "Why are you throwing back the best fish?" And his answer is simple. Because my frying pan at home is too small. You see, his problem wasn't a lack of opportunity in the river. The big fish were there. His problem was the limitation of his own equipment. And that frying pan, well, that's a powerful metaphor for our mind. You see, our brains are actually wired to filter reality. We have something called the reticular activating system, or RAS for short. Think of it like a bouncer for your brain. It sees the millions of bits of information coming at you every second, and it decides what gets in. And what does it base that on? Your existing beliefs, your worldview. So if a brand new massive idea comes along that doesn't fit your mental frying pan, your brain might literally toss it out before you even have a chance to consciously think about it.
And this isn't just about us as individuals. Whole cultures can have a mental frying pan. Like the slideshows, you had some cultures that were all about signs and miracles, while others were focused only on logic and wisdom. So when a new idea came along that didn't fit into either of those categories, it just seemed like foolishness to them. It was a stumbling block because it was just too big for their cultural pan. And that is the real takeaway here. If you want to receive a truly massive, transformative idea, you have to be willing to challenge your own filters. You have to make a conscious decision to get a bigger frying pan. So, this all leads to a really powerful question we should all ask ourselves. To solve the biggest problems in our lives and in our world, we have to be willing to question the very things that shape our reality. So let me ask you, what breakthrough idea are you throwing back into the river simply because you think it won't fit in your frying pan?